The small corner café in Brooklyn lay submerged in the pale light of late afternoon. Marcus Blackwood sat alone at the table by the window, the place he came every Saturday to slip away from a world of blood and guns. No bodyguards, no phone, only a cup of black espresso and the silence. The door chimed with a soft jingle. A little girl stepped inside, her brown curls messy, her coat too large for her frame, her canvas shoes worn down at the edges. She hugged a teddy bear tight against her chest, one ear dangling, nearly torn away, and she walked straight to his table, ignoring everyone else. She tilted her face up to the man the whole city feared, and then she said, very seriously, "Sir, can you fix my toy? Mom says it was the last gift from Dad." Marcus went still, not because of the question, but because of the way she spoke. So respectful, so sorrowful, far beyond her years. She paused, then added, "Mom says we shouldn't throw away things with love in them." Her small fingers tightened around the bear as if she were afraid it might vanish. Those blue eyes held no fear, only a quiet, steady hope. Marcus looked at the torn bear, then looked back at her. When was the last time anyone had looked at him with hope instead of terror? And her words kept echoing in his mind, as if they were asking him, too. Was he throwing away something that held love in it, somewhere in his own life? If this story touched your heart, please tap like to support the channel, share it with anyone who may need healing, and subscribe so you won't miss the next soul-stirring stories to come. The sound of hurried footsteps rose from the doorway. A woman burst into the cafe, breath coming fast, her eyes sweeping the room as if she were searching for the most precious thing on earth. When her gaze landed on the corner table by the window, where her daughter stood in front of a stranger, her face drained of color with fear. "Grace," she called, her voice trembling. "What are you doing in here?" The woman rushed over and dropped to her knees at her daughter's height, both hands gripping the little girl's shoulders as if the child might disappear. Her name was Scarlett Morgan, 27 years old, but exhaustion had carved itself so deeply into her face that she looked older than her years. Her skin was so pale it was nearly translucent, and heavy shadows beneath her brown eyes sat like bruises that never healed. Her auburn hair had been yanked into a loose ponytail, a few tangled strands escaping and sticking to her sweat-damp forehead. She wore a light gray cleaning uniform, a company logo stamped across her chest, and bright yellow rubber gloves still clung to her hands because she had not even had time to take them off. Her old sneakers were smeared with dirt, as if she had run across several blocks just to find her child. She was so thin her collarbones pressed up beneath the flimsy fabric, yet the way she held her daughter carried the strength of a mother who would do anything to protect her only child. "I'm sorry, Mom," Grace whispered, "but I thought he could fix Teddy." Scarlett lifted her head, and for the first time she looked directly at the man seated in front of them, and she froze. There was something about Marcus Blackwood that made her survival instincts ring like an alarm. Not the expensive black suit, not the silver watch at his wrist. It was the steel, cold gray of his eyes, and the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Those were the eyes of a man who had seen too much darkness, and maybe had created plenty of it himself. She pulled Grace back a single step, protection rising in her like a reflex. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, forcing calm into her voice while her hands tightened on her daughter's shoulders. "She shouldn't have bothered you. We'll leave right now." She started to turn, to take Grace and get out as fast as she could, but Marcus's voice came, low and slow, and it stopped her in place. "The little girl asked me to fix the bear." Scarlett turned back, certain she had misheard. She looked at the man whose sharp features carried danger in every line, then at her daughter clutching that torn stuffed animal, and she could not understand why someone like him would care about something like this. "You don't have to do that," she said, quieter now, her words carrying the fatigue of someone used to refusing kindness because she had learned it always came with conditions. "I'll fix it myself for her." Marcus looked at her, then down at her hands, those thin fingers inside the rubber gloves, the calluses, the cracks showing at her wrists. He said nothing about any of it. He only spoke, his tone flat, as if he were stating something obvious. "I'll fix it. Next week, same time, same place." Scarlett stood there with her mouth slightly open, not knowing how to respond. She had met every kind of person in years of hard living, people who gave only to take, people who wore kindness like a mask, men who looked at her with calculation in their eyes. But she had never met anyone like this. A man who carried suffocating danger, and yet offered to mend a teddy bear for a 4-year-old child he had never known. "Mom," Grace tugged at her hand, her eyes bright. "He said he'll fix Teddy." Scarlett looked down at her daughter and saw that shimmering hope in those blue eyes. The very light Scarlett feared would go out if she said no. She looked back at Marcus, searching for a sign of deceit, but found only a patient silence, as if he could wait, no matter what she chose. "Thank you," she finally said. So softly it was almost a breath. It was all she could manage right now. Grace looked at her mother, then at Marcus, as if asking permission one last time. When Scarlett gave a small nod, the child stepped forward slowly, lifting the teddy bear to her chest with both hands. She did not offer it up in a hurry, or carelessly. She handed it over as if she were giving away a piece of her own soul. Careful, respectful, with a solemnity adults rarely see in a 4-year-old. "You'll keep Teddy safe?" "Yes, sir," she asked, her voice small but utterly serious. Marcus reached out and took the bear. Hands that were used to holding guns and signing million-dollar contracts now touched fur worn thin and faded by time and love. He felt its weight, not the physical weight, but the weight of memory, of loss, of what a child clings to when the world has taken her father away. "I promise," he said. And even he was surprised to hear a promise leave his mouth. How long had it been since he had promised anyone anything, when in his world a promise was a luxury that could get you killed? Grace smiled, the first smile he had seen from her, bright as sunlight breaking through clouds. Then she turned back to her mother, took Scarlett's hand, and looked up at her with complete trust. "Mom, he'll fix Teddy." "I knew he would." Scarlett said nothing. She only nodded, her eyes still on Marcus, wary and confused all at once. She did not understand this man. She did not understand why he was doing this, but she was too tired to ask. She guided her daughter toward the door, glanced back one last time, and whispered a thank you that Marcus was not even sure he heard. The doorbell chimed again as mother and child stepped outside, leaving Marcus alone with the teddy bear in his hands. He looked down at it. The torn ear hung loose. The fur was rough, no longer plush. The plastic eyes were a little cloudy, yet they still caught the cafe's warm yellow light and glimmered. He stood, left a few bills on the table, many times more than the price of a single espresso, and walked out. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. Roman Vance stood by the door, tall, broad, his face as unreadable as ever. When he saw Marcus step out holding a teddy bear, the loyal bodyguard's eyes widened in surprise, but he did not ask a question. 15 years at Marcus's side had taught Roman that there were questions you did not ask, and moments your boss needed to be left alone. He simply opened the door, waited for Marcus to get in, then slid silently into the driver's seat. The car moved smoothly through the streets of Brooklyn. The late afternoon sun faded, giving way to darkness slipping into every alley. Marcus sat in the back, the teddy bear resting on his lap, his fingers absent-mindedly stroking the worn fur. He stared out the window, but he was not truly seeing anything. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere older. A long time ago, he remembered the old house in Queens. He remembered his 10th birthday, when his father set a small wooden box in front of him. Inside was a model airplane, carved by hand, painted navy blue, with a propeller that could still spin. He remembered the first moment his fingers touched it, the shock of wonder, the rush of happiness swelling in the chest of a 10-year-old boy. But he also remembered his father's face, cold, distant, no smile, no hug, only 4 words, "Don't break it." Then his father turned away and walked into the room with the closed door, where secret calls were taken and blood-soaked decisions were made. Marcus looked down at the teddy bear, his fingers stopping at the torn ear. He had not kept that airplane safe. He had left it behind with everything else when he walked out at 18, carrying anger and a vow to never become his father. But now, sitting here with a stranger's teddy bear, he wondered whether he was moving toward something new, or only running from old memories. For the first time in many years, Marcus Blackwood was not going because of habit. He was going because he had promised. The penthouse sat on the highest floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, where Marcus could look down on the whole city like a king surveying his kingdom. But tonight he was not standing at the glass the way he usually did. He sat at a long dining table meant for 12 people, a table where no one had ever sat with him. And in front of him lay a small teddy bear and a sewing kit he had found in the housekeeper's drawer. The apartment was more than 300 square meters, minimalist in black, gray, and white, with bare walls, no photographs, no keepsakes. Everything was expensive, and everything felt cold, as if it had been designed for a museum instead of a place where a human being lived. There was no warmth here, no trace of memory or tenderness, only the lifeless perfection of a shelter Marcus had never truly called home. He opened the sewing kit and looked at the spools of thread in many colors, the shining needles laid out neatly in red velvet. His hands, the hands that had once squeezed a trigger without hesitation, now fumbled with a tiny needle, trying to feed brown thread through an eye so small it seemed almost cruel. The first time, he missed. The second time, the thread frayed. The third time, He held his breath, focused the way he would when aiming at a distant target, and at last the thread slipped through. He knotted one end, and then he began to sew. The first stitch drove straight into his finger. Blood welled up, a single dark red drop. Marcus did not notice. He wiped it on the napkin beside him and kept going, patient in a way he had never been patient with anything before. The second stitch went crooked, and he pulled it out and started again. The third was still uneven, but he did not undo it. He simply went on to the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. The room was so quiet he could hear the thread sliding through fabric, the soft tap of the needle against the thimble, the steady rhythm of his own breathing. He watched the torn ear slowly return to the bear's head, one stitch at a time, slow but sure. Something strange rose in his chest, a feeling he could not name. All his life, he had only known how to destroy. Destroy rivals, destroy traitors, destroy anyone who dared stand in his way. He had built an empire on ruthlessness, on blood, on the fear he planted in other people's hearts. But tonight, for the first time in 37 years, he was making something. He was repairing instead of breaking. He was mending instead of wounding. The needle pierced his finger again, deeper this time, and more blood came. He glanced at the cut and saw the bead of blood gathering at the tip of his finger like a tiny red jewel. And then he kept sewing. Pain. He was used to pain, but this kind of pain was different. It did not carry hatred or the hunger for revenge. It was simply the cost of creating something good, and he was willing to pay it. Time passed, and he did not know how much. An hour, 2 hours, maybe more. The city lights blinked beyond the windows, but he did not look out. His eyes stayed on the teddy bear, on the ear being reattached little by little, on stitches that were not perfect, but were growing steadier. At last he tied the final knot, cut away the extra thread, and lifted the bear up in front of him. The ear was back on. Not perfect, the stitches still uneven, the thread a little loose in a few places, but it was secure. It would not fall off again. He looked at the bear, then down at his fingers, speckled with small red punctures from the needle. He could not remember the last time he had done anything with these hands that had nothing to do with violence or power. Maybe never. He set the bear on the table, rose, and walked to the glass. The city spread beneath him, millions of lights flickering like stars that had fallen to the ground. He stared, but he did not truly see. In his mind there was only the image of that little girl's blue eyes, the serious sound of her voice, and her words about how things with love inside them should not be thrown away. He turned back to the teddy bear on the table, its ear now mended, and he wondered whether somewhere, somehow, there might be someone who could mend the tears inside him, too. Marcus still stood by the glass, but his eyes were no longer on the city. The lights flickering far below, blurred and faded, giving way to images from the past that surged in like a tide. He was 10 years old, sitting at an oak table in the old house in Queens. In front of him was a small birthday cake with 10 candles burning. His mother stood beside him, smiling softly, but his father, Victor Blackwood, sat across from him with a face as cold as stone, without a single expression. Young Marcus blew out the candles and closed his eyes to make a wish he did not dare say out loud, that his father would hug him once, just once. When he opened his eyes, Victor pushed a small wooden box across the table. No wrapping paper, no ribbon, only a rough wooden box marked with the scratches of time. Marcus opened it with hands trembling from excitement, and when he saw what was inside, his heart seemed to miss a beat. A wooden model airplane, painted navy blue, carved entirely by hand. He could see the careful knife marks along the body, the smooth curve of the wings sanded down to perfection, the small propeller that could spin when he blew on it. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his eyes shining. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He looked up at his father, wanting to say thank you, wanting to say I love you. But Victor had already risen, his face unchanged. "Don't break it," he said, low and cold. Only 4 words. Then he turned and walked into his office, closing the door behind him. Young Marcus sat there with the airplane pressed to his chest. All the words he wanted to speak stuck in his throat. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder and squeezed gently, as if she understood everything he was feeling. "Your father loves you in his own way," she murmured. But the boy did not understand. How could it be called love when there was no hug, no smile, no tender word? In the years that followed, the airplane always sat on the shelf beside his bed. Every night before sleeping, he would look at it and imagine how many hours his father had spent carving each line, sanding each edge. Was that how his father showed love? Was every knife mark a sentence his father wanted to say, but did not know how? He never got an answer. Then, at 18, after his mother's funeral, after Victor shed not a single tear, After he stood beside his wife's coffin with a face as hard as stone, Marcus decided to leave. He stuffed a few clothes into a backpack, looked around his room one last time, and his eyes landed on the model airplane on the shelf. He reached for it, meaning to take it. And then he stopped. That airplane belonged to a different version of him, a boy who still had hope, a boy who still waited for love from his father. That version had died with his mother. He turned his back and walked away, leaving the airplane on the shelf to gather dust with time. The city lights pulled Marcus back to the present. He stood in the cold penthouse, more than 20 years gone since that night. He had built an empire. He had become the man the whole city feared. He had everything money could buy, but he did not have that airplane. He turned and looked at the teddy bear on the table, its ear sewn back on with his clumsy stitches. That little girl would not lose her father's gift. She would not have to carry regret the way he had carried it for so many years. He walked to the table and lifted the bear, his finger brushing lightly over the newly sewn ear. "I should have kept that airplane," he whispered into the empty room, his voice rough. No one heard him. No one answered. Only the silence, and the teddy bear with its plastic eyes catching the light, as if it understood. The following Saturday, Marcus arrived at the café 15 minutes earlier than usual. He sat at his familiar table by the window, but this time the table held more than a cup of black espresso. Beside the coffee sat a brown paper bag, its top folded neatly closed, and inside it was the teddy bear, repaired. He had also ordered a hot chocolate and a cup of chamomile tea. He did not know why he had done it. It was only that when he passed the counter, he suddenly thought of a 4-year-old child and her exhausted mother. Late afternoon sunlight slipped through the glass, laying warm golden streaks across the wooden tabletop. Marcus looked outside, watching people move along the sidewalk, but his eyes kept returning to the door. He did not understand why he was waiting, why his heart beat faster every time the bell chimed. He was Marcus Blackwood, the man who ruled Brooklyn with an iron fist. He should not be hoping for anything from a young widow and her little girl. The doorbell rang. Marcus lifted his head, and he saw Grace. She stood at the threshold, her eyes sweeping the café, searching. When her gaze landed on him, her face lit up like the sunrise. "He came," she cried, her clear voice ringing through the quiet café. "He really came back. Mom." She ran toward Marcus, small feet tapping fast across the wooden floor, brown curls bouncing with every step. "You came back," she said when she stopped in front of him, breathless, her eyes sparkling. "I thought you wouldn't come back. Grown-ups forget a lot." The words struck Marcus in the chest like a small blade. She was only 4, and yet she already knew what it meant to be promised something and have it broken. She was already used to adults forgetting what they said. He wondered how many times she had waited for someone to return and they never did. How many times she had learned that hope so often led to disappointment. "I promised," he said, his voice low and softer than he expected. "I always keep my promises." He slid the paper bag toward her. "This is yours." Grace looked at the bag, then at him, then at the bag again. She reached out slowly, as if afraid this was only a dream, and everything would disappear if she touched it too fast. She opened the bag, looked inside, and Marcus saw those blue eyes widen with shock. "Teddy," she whispered, her voice catching. "Teddy's ear is better." She lifted the teddy bear out, hugged it tight to her chest, and then she did something that made Marcus freeze completely. She threw herself into him, small arms wrapped around his waist, holding him as tightly as she could. "Thank you," she said, her words muffled against his suit jacket. "Thank you so much." Marcus went rigid. He could not remember the last time anyone had hugged him. Maybe his mother, years ago, before she fell ill, before everything collapsed. His hands hovered at his sides, not knowing where to go. Then, slowly, as if relearning something he had forgotten long ago, he lowered them and placed one hand on her back, patting gently. Scarlett stood a few steps away, one hand covering her mouth, her eyes red. She had seen it all. The way her daughter ran to a stranger without hesitation, the way Grace held him as if he were someone dear, and the way the man who seemed so cold began to soften, little by little, under the arms of a 4-year-old child. "Thank you," Scarlett said, her voice trembling. "What this means to us, I don't even know how to say it." She did not finish the sentence, because she could not find words that were enough. That teddy bear was the only thing Grace still had from her father, the last fragile thread connecting her to the man who had loved her without condition, and then was gone forever. And now, a complete stranger had taken the time to mend it, to keep that thread from snapping. Marcus looked at Scarlett and saw tears sliding down her cheeks even as she tried to hold them back. He said nothing about it. He did not offer comfort with empty phrases. He only nodded toward the chair across from him. "Sit down, both of you," he said. I already ordered drinks. Scarlett blinked, startled, looking at the hot chocolate and the cup of tea on the table. She opened her mouth to refuse, but Grace tugged her hand. Mom, he bought me hot chocolate. Scarlett looked at her daughter, at the joy shining in those blue eyes, then at the mysterious man waiting for her answer. She did not understand him. She did not know what he wanted, but her daughter was smiling, and that was something Scarlett would trade anything to see. Yes, she said softly. Thank you. From that Saturday afternoon on, everything began to change in ways none of them could have predicted. The first week, Grace brought a box of colored pencils and a sketchbook. She sat beside Marcus, bent over her pages, filling in clumsy little shapes while he drank his coffee. Scarlett sat across from them with a worn paperback in her hands, but her eyes kept drifting away from the words to watch her daughter and the mysterious man beside her. She still did not understand why he was here, why he was giving time to a poor widow and a little girl who had lost her father, but she did not ask. Some good things were better received than questioned. Marcus did not speak much. He only sat there and listened as Grace chattered about preschool, about her friends, about the neighbor's cat she wanted to keep, but her mother said the apartment would not allow it. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he answered with one or two short words. But the steel, cold gray of his eyes softened, little by little. With every innocent story the child told, he did not notice it. Scarlett did. She saw the corner of his mouth lift when Grace said something silly. She saw his gaze ease when the little girl laughed. And she began to wonder who this man truly was beneath that frightening, icy shell. The second week, Grace happened to mention cupcakes when she spotted one on the counter. Do you like cupcakes? She asked Marcus. I like chocolate cupcakes with vanilla frosting, but Mom says we have to save money, so I don't get them much. Marcus said nothing, only gave a small nod. But the next week, when mother and daughter arrived, 2 chocolate cupcakes with vanilla frosting were already on the table. One large, one small, set on a white porcelain plate. Grace's eyes went round as marbles. For me, she asked, her voice full of disbelief. Marcus nodded. He remembered, Scarlett whispered, and there was something in her voice she could not name. He remembered a detail that small. The third week, Brooklyn was drenched in pounding rain. Marcus arrived right on time as always, but Scarlett and Grace came nearly 20 minutes late. When the door opened, he saw Scarlett step inside with her clothes soaked through, hair plastered to her face, one hand holding Grace, who was just as wet. Her thin coat had not been enough against the storm. She shivered with cold, trying to hide it so her daughter would not worry. Marcus stood without thinking. He took off the black wool coat he was wearing, walked to Scarlett, and settled it over her shoulders. She went still, lifting her eyes to him, her mouth parting as if to say something, maybe to refuse, maybe to thank him. But Marcus had already turned away, calling for the staff to bring more towels and 2 cups of hot tea. He did not say a word. He did not explain. As if it were the most obvious thing in the world, Scarlett stood there with his coat heavy and warm on her shoulders, carrying a faint scent of sandalwood and coffee, and she realized something that left her breath unsteady. This was the first time in 3 years, since David died, that anyone had cared about her like this. The 4th week, Grace finished a special drawing. She had worked on it the whole time, hiding it whenever Marcus glanced her way. When she was done, she lifted the paper and handed it to him with the solemn look of a child presenting a treasure. For you, she said. I drew my family. Marcus looked at the picture. 3 stick figures in crayon, messy but unmistakable. The smallest one in the middle, with brown curly hair, holding the hands of 2 taller figures on either side. On one side was a woman in a blue dress, labeled in uneven, still learning letters, Mom. On the other side was a tall man in black, labeled, Mr. Marcus. At the top of the page, in big and little letters that did not match, Grace had written, Mom, me, and Mr. Marcus. Scarlett stared at the drawing, one hand rising to cover her mouth, her eyes shining. She was about to apologize, to explain that Grace did not mean anything by it, but when she looked at Marcus, she saw an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not cold, not distant, something almost fragile, as if he were trying not to shatter. I'll keep this one, he said, his voice rougher than usual. That night, back in the penthouse, Marcus did not slip the drawing into a drawer or hide it somewhere out of sight. He carried it into his office, the room of white cold walls and black and gray furniture, where he made life and death decisions every day. He hung the drawing right above his desk, so that every time he lifted his head, he would see those 3 colorful, crooked figures. It was the only color in the black and white room, a small beam of light inside a darkness that had always surrounded him, and Marcus realized he did not want to lose it. 2 days after that Saturday afternoon, Roman placed a thin file on Marcus's desk. Marcus had not asked him to investigate, but his loyal bodyguard had understood his boss for a long time. From the way Marcus looked at that woman and that child, from the crooked drawing now hanging on the office wall, Marcus opened the file and read it line by line, and each line felt like a blade carving into his chest. Scarlett Morgan, 27 years old, widow, 3 jobs, cashier at a grocery store from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, shelving books at the library from 3 in the afternoon until 6, cleaning offices from 8 at night until midnight, 16 to 18 hours of work a day, 7 days a week, hospital debt from Grace's premature birth, still not paid off after 4 years, 2 months behind on rent, an eviction notice set to take effect within 2 weeks. Marcus closed the file, his jaw clenched tight. He had seen her exhaustion. He had seen the dark circles under her eyes and the cracked hands shaped by labor, but he had not known it was this bad. She was killing herself to feed her child. The next afternoon, Marcus stood outside the door of a shabby third-floor apartment in an old building on the east side of Brooklyn. The staircase sagged. The hallway was nearly dark. The smell of dampness hit the back of his throat. He knocked. When Scarlett opened the door, her face went pale with shock. "You know where I live," she said, her voice shaking. Not a question. A terrified statement. "Who are you? Really?" Marcus did not circle around it. He knew if he lied, she would feel it, and he did not want to build anything on a foundation of deceit. "I am who you think I am," he said plainly. "My work isn't clean. People call me Mafia, and they're not wrong." Scarlett stepped back, one hand gripping the edge of the door. Her eyes widened, fear and disappointment twisting together, as if the world had collapsed under her feet one more time. "Why are you here?" she asked, trying to make her voice hard, but it trembled at the end. "What do you want from us?" Marcus did not step inside. He did not push. He stayed on the threshold, giving her the distance she needed to feel safe. "I came to tell you this. Your rent has been paid. 1 year. Scarlett blinked, not understanding. "I can't accept that," she said, shaking her head. "I don't know what you want in return, but I have nothing to give." Marcus looked straight into her eyes. "I don't need anything in return. This isn't a favor. This is the right thing." Scarlett stood there, confused, panicked, not knowing whether to believe him or slam the door and call the police. But then she remembered the man who had sewn her daughter's teddy bear back together. The man who bought cupcakes because he remembered what Grace liked. The man who had laid his coat over Scarlett's shoulders in the rain without saying a word. Was that man a monster? "You're Mafia," she said slowly, as if trying to force herself to accept the truth. "I'm someone trying not to be that." Marcus answered, his voice low, honest in a way he had never been honest with anyone. "At least when I'm with you two." Silence stretched between them, heavy and tight. Scarlett did not know what to do. She did not know whether to trust him, whether to push him away, or give him one chance. Then a bright shout rang out behind her. "Mr. Marcus." Grace ran out from the back room, small feet flying, her face lighting up when she saw him. She darted past her mother, wrapped her arms around Marcus's leg, and looked up at him with those shining blue eyes. "You came to my house," she squealed. "Mom, Mr. Marcus came to my house." Scarlett looked at her daughter. At the way the child held the man, the whole city feared as if he were the dearest person in the world. Then she let out a quiet breath, realizing she had lost this inner battle a long time ago. "Come in," she said softly. "I have tea." On the first Sunday, they went together to Central Park. The sky was a clear blue without a single cloud. The sunlight gentle, like golden silk spread across the lush green lawns. Grace ran ahead, small feet quick on the gravel path, brown curls flying in the breeze, her bright laughter echoing through the peaceful air. She held her teddy bear tight in one hand, and with the other she pointed at everything, squealing whenever a squirrel darted past or a bird perched on a branch. Marcus walked beside Scarlett, his pace slowing to match hers instead of the usual hurried rhythm of a man whose days were always packed tight. Today he was not wearing a black suit or a white shirt the way he normally did, only a pale blue button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and dark jeans. He looked younger, lighter, as if some invisible weight he always carried on his shoulders had finally been set down. Scarlett glanced at him, still not used to seeing him like this. He looked so different, she thought, like a completely different man from the Mafia boss she had researched after that night. She had searched his name online. She had read articles about the Blackwood family, about rumors, about cases that never had enough evidence to prosecute. She knew he was dangerous. She knew his world was soaked in blood and cruelty. But she also knew he had sewn her daughter's teddy bear back together. He had paid her rent without asking for anything. He had sat and listened while she spoke about David, never saying a single unnecessary word. Which version of him was real? Or were they both real? Carousel, Mom. Grace ran back, tugging on Scarlett's hand. Let's ride the horses, Mom. Scarlett looked at the old-fashioned carousel, the painted horses in bright colors turning slowly to cheerful music, then looked down into her daughter's shining eyes. She opened her wallet and counted the few coins she had left. But Marcus stepped to the ticket booth before she could. 3 tickets, he told the attendant, his voice as clipped as ever, then turned and handed the tickets to Grace. Grace squealed with delight, clutching them as she ran to the carousel, climbing onto a blue-painted horse with a mane that glittered gold. Scarlett stood at the railing, watching her daughter go around in circles, Grace's laughter blending with the tinkling music. Marcus stood beside her, silent, but his gray eyes never left the child riding in pure happiness. "Did you ever come to the park when you were a kid?" Scarlett asked, not sure why she suddenly felt curious. Marcus did not answer right away. He watched the other children running, the parents laughing with them. Then he gave a small shake of his head. "Never," he said, his voice low and distant. "My father thought it was a waste of time. Blackwood time had to be used to learn how to be strong, not to play pointless games." Scarlett looked at him and saw something flicker in those steel-gray eyes. A brief sadness, gone as quickly as it came. She did not speak. She only stood beside him in silence, watching Grace circle a few more times before the carousel finally slowed to a stop. After that, they found a big tree with shade and spread a thin blanket on the grass for a picnic. Grace opened a plastic box she had hugged all the way from home. Inside were tiny sandwiches cut into lopsided triangles. "I made them," she announced proudly, "with cheese and cucumber. Mom only helped me cut them." She picked up one sandwich and held it out to Marcus, watching him expectantly. "Try it," she said. "I made it really good." Marcus looked at the little sandwich in his hand, the bread slightly crooked, the cheese spilling out, the cucumber unevenly sliced. He had eaten in the finest restaurants in the world. He had tasted dishes made by the best chefs, but he had never held a piece of food that felt like this. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. "Good," he said, and he truly meant it. Not because of the flavor, but because of the heart of the child who had made it. Grace beamed, turning to brag to her mother, and Scarlett looked at Marcus and saw the corner of his mouth lift into a small smile, one he probably did not even realize was there. "He's gentle in a way I never expected," she thought. The way he watched Grace, the way he listened to her, the patience he had for every innocent question. "You're good to her," she said out loud before she could stop herself. Marcus looked at her, then at Grace trying to chase a butterfly floating past, her laughter ringing over the grass. "She makes it easy," he answered quietly. The afternoon in the park stretched on until sunset painted the sky red, and Grace still did not want to leave. She sat on the blanket, bent over her paper, working on a new drawing with the box of colored pencils Scarlett always carried in her bag. Marcus and Scarlett sat beside her, quiet, watching the late day fade. No one spoke, yet the silence was not heavy. It was strangely comforting. "Finished," Grace suddenly sang out, lifting the drawing from the pad and holding it up so both adults could see. Scarlett leaned in to look, and her heart seemed to miss a beat. The picture showed 4 people now, not 3 like last time. There was still the woman in a blue dress with the word Mom beside her, still the tiny little girl in the middle, still the tall man in black labeled Mr. Marcus. But this time, up high, between clouds shaded pink and orange, there was another figure, a person with big white wings, and beside it, in crooked, childish letters, one word, "Daddy." "That's Daddy in heaven," Grace explained, her voice innocent, as if she were saying the most obvious thing in the world. "Daddy is watching us, Mom. Daddy is so happy because Mr. Marcus plays with me." Scarlett could not speak. The tears came before she could stop them, sliding down her cheeks and dropping onto the blanket. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth, trying to hold back the sob rising in her throat. For 3 years she had tried to be strong for her daughter. She had swallowed her tears night after night once Grace was asleep. She had told herself she had to stay steady so her little girl would never see her fall apart. But this drawing, this innocence, the way her child placed her father in the sky like an angel watching over them, it brought down every wall Scarlett had built. Marcus watched Scarlett cry, then looked at the drawing, then at the child who stared up at her mother, confused, not understanding why she was sad. He did not know what to say to comfort her. He had never been good at this. But he opened his mouth, and the words came more naturally than he expected. "He would be proud of you," he said, his voice low and gentle, looking straight into Scarlett's eyes. "Proud of both of you, of the mother who has done everything for her daughter, and of the little girl who has grown up so sweet and so kind." Scarlett looked at him. Her tears were still falling, but something shifted in her brown eyes. A small light inside the pain, as if his words had reached a deep place in her. The sunset drained away. The sky moved from red and orange to deep purple, then slowly to black. Grace lay down on the blanket, her head resting on her mother's lap, eyes half closed as she stared up at the first stars beginning to glitter. "Mr. Marcus," she murmured, her voice already sleepy. "Yes, little one," he answered. There was a pause, and then she asked, a whisper like a secret, "Can you be my dad?" Marcus went perfectly still. The question hit him like a fist, stealing his breath for a few seconds. He opened his mouth, wanting to answer, but no words came. He looked down at the child, but Grace was already asleep, her breathing even, her face peaceful, unaware that her innocent question had just shaken the whole world inside the coldest man in Brooklyn. Scarlett was still crying, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. Marcus stood, stepped closer to her, and did something he never would have imagined himself doing. He lifted his hand and used his thumb to gently wipe the tears from her face. It was the first time he had touched her, and both of them felt something shift between them, fragile, but real. 3 days after that afternoon in the park, Marcus's phone vibrated while he sat in his office, staring at the drawing of 4 people that Grace had just given him. He had hung it beside the first drawing, 2 colorful, crooked pictures standing out against the cold black and white room. A name appeared on the screen, a name he did not expect to see. Victor Blackwood. He stared at it for a few seconds, his thumb hovering over the answer button. It had been almost a year since the last time father and son had spoken, and that call had lasted less than 2 minutes before ending in the same icy silence that always swallowed their conversations. He pressed the green button. "I hear you have been busy." Victor's voice came through the line, low and cold the way Marcus remembered it. No greeting, no asking how he was, only straight to the point, the way Victor had always done. "Who did you hear it from?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, though his body had already tightened like a drawn wire. "My eyes and ears are everywhere, my son. Do you think I do not know what you are doing? Come see me, this afternoon." The call ended. Victor did not wait for Marcus to agree or refuse. That was Victor Blackwood's way. He never asked. He only ordered, and he assumed the world would obey. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the Long Island estate, where Victor had withdrawn since officially handing control over to Marcus 5 years earlier. He called it retirement, but Marcus knew men like Victor Blackwood never truly retired. They only stepped back into the shadows, watched, waited, and pulled strings from behind velvet curtains. The massive mansion sat on a property of dozens of acres, enclosed by tall iron fencing and a security team that never left their posts. Marcus passed through the familiar iron gate, walked the stone path to the front door, and with every step he felt himself being pulled backward in time, to the days when he was 10 years old and afraid of his father's footsteps in the hallway. A servant led him into Victor's study, the room Marcus had called the Devil's Den throughout his childhood. The curtains were drawn tight. Only a small desk lamp cast a weak yellow glow, leaving most of the room drowned in darkness. Victor sat in a large leather chair behind the desk, his posture still straight even at 68, his white hair slicked back, his gray eyes sharp as 2 blades waiting for prey. Beside him rested a cane with a silver handle, something he had begun using after knee surgery 3 years earlier, though Marcus knew Victor hated it, hated anything that reminded him of the weakness of age. "Son," Victor said. He did not rise. He did not invite Marcus warmly. He only looked him over with a measuring gaze, as if judging a piece of merchandise. "Sit." Marcus did not sit. He stood across from his father, arms folded over his chest, his eyes refusing to give ground. "What do you want?" Victor smiled, a cold smile that never reached his eyes. "I want to know why my son, the heir to the Blackwood Empire, is spending his time with a poor widow and her small child, a widow working 3 jobs, living in a shabby apartment, drowning in debt. Is that what you choose?" "They are not a thing," Marcus replied, his voice no warmer than his father's. "They are people, and they have nothing to do with you." Victor rose slowly, leaning on the cane as he stepped closer. Age had slowed his stride, but the threat that rolled off him was as strong as it had ever been. "Everything connected to the Blackwood name is connected to me," he said, his voice hardening. "Do you think I do not know who she is? Naive, weak, nothing but a child, and a pile of debt, just like your mother once was." Marcus went rigid, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth ground against each other. "Do not mention my mother." Victor met his son's stare without flinching. "Why?" "Because the truth is hard to hear. Your mother was just as naive, just as ready to believe in love and those useless things. And what was the result? She died in pain, and you hate me down to your bones." "Mother died because of you," Marcus snapped, his voice trembling with the effort of holding back his rage. Mother died because of the life you forced her to live, because of the loneliness you made her endure, because you were not there when she needed you, because you did not hold her hand while she was dying. Do not blame anyone but yourself." The room fell into silence after Marcus's accusations, heavy and suffocating, like the air before a storm. Victor stood there, his face unreadable, but his steel gray eyes darkened, like a sky thickening with thunder. Marcus knew he was angry. He knew no one spoke to Victor Blackwood that way and lived. But Marcus did not care. He had been silent for too long. He had swallowed these words for 20 years. Now they poured out like volcanic lava, impossible to stop. "You are walking on a dangerous edge," Victor finally said, his voice low and slow, like a snake's hiss before it strikes. "I gave you everything. Power, money, this empire. And you want to throw it away for a woman and a child who have nothing to do with us. They are not something you get to decide," Marcus answered, his voice hard as steel. "I will keep seeing them. I will protect them. And you cannot do anything to stop it." Victor smiled, a cold smile that was almost frightening. "Can't do anything. Do you think I'm old now? And I have no power left. I built this empire with my bare hands. I removed enemies 100 times stronger than you. A poor widow and a 4-year-old child are nothing." He moved closer to Marcus, his cane tapping a rhythm on the wooden floor. Each tap sounded like a threat. "I will act if you do not stop," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I will do what must be done to protect the Blackwood family from your stupidity." Marcus looked straight into his father's eyes. He did not blink. He did not step back. "If you touch them," he said slowly, each word clear, as if carved into stone, "I will treat you like an enemy, not a father, not blood, an enemy. And you know what I do to enemies." Victor stopped, his gaze sharp as a blade boring into his son. Then he laughed, a dry sound echoing through the dark room. "Are you threatening me? Your father, the man who gave you life, raised you, made you the man standing here today." "You did not raise me," Marcus said coldly. "You trained me into your weapon, and weapons eventually turn on the hand that holds them." Victor went quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly, as if he were measuring his son again. "Fine," he said at last. "I understand now. You want war. You will have war. But remember this, Marcus. I am the most terrifying enemy you have ever had. I know every weakness you carry, every crack in the armor you wear, and now I know one more weakness. That woman and that child." Marcus did not answer. He turned his back and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the long hallway like war drums. He did not look back. He did not say goodbye. He only walked away, as if leaving a dark chapter of his life behind. Night had fallen by the time Marcus drove back toward Manhattan, the highway stretching ahead like a ribbon of black silk under the streetlights. He drove faster than usual, trying to outrun his father's threats. But the memories rose anyway, unstoppable. He remembered the white hospital room, the sharp bite of antiseptic in the air, the steady beep of the heart monitor, then slower, slower. His mother lay in the bed, thin and pale, her dry hand gripping the hand of her 18-year-old son. Marcus stayed with her through those final days. But Victor never came. He called. He said he was busy with something important. He said he would come as soon as he could, but that soon never came. And when his mother drew her last breath, her cracked lips still whispered one name. Victor. She spoke the name of the man who had abandoned her for her entire life, the man who was not there when she needed him most. And Marcus hated his father for it more than anything. He hated Victor for not coming. And he hated himself because deep down he had still wanted his father to come, still hoped, like a foolish child. He pulled out his phone and dialed Roman. The loyal bodyguard answered after the first ring. "Boss, increase security for Scarlett and Grace," Marcus said, without hesitation. 24/7. Discreet, but no mistakes. Anyone who gets close to them who isn't me, tell me immediately. There was a second of silence, then Roman replied. "Understood, boss." Marcus ended the call and stared at the dark road ahead. He did not know how this war would end, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not let anyone hurt them, not even his father. 3 days after the confrontation between Marcus and Victor, Scarlett finished her office cleaning shift just before midnight, as usual. She stepped out of the tall building in Manhattan, pulling her thin coat tight against the bite of the late-night cold. The street was nearly empty, only a few cars gliding past and the wind whistling between the high-rises. She walked quickly toward the night bus stop, her mind on Grace asleep at home, with the kind neighbor, on the bills due at the end of the month, on Marcus and the Saturday afternoons that had become the thing she looked forward to most each week. She did not notice the black car parked in a dark alley until 2 men stepped out and blocked her path. They wore black suits. They were tall, thick through the shoulders, their faces cold and expressionless. Scarlett stopped. Her heart pounded. Every instinct in her lit up like a siren. She took one step back, ready to turn and run. But one of the men spoke. "Miss Morgan," he said, as calmly as if he were talking about the weather, "we do not mean to harm you. We only have an offer." "Who are you?" Scarlett asked, her voice shaking, fighting to stay steady. "What do you want from me?" The first man stepped closer, pulled a white envelope from inside his jacket, and held it out to her. "We represent Mr. Victor Blackwood," he said. "He sends his regards, and he would like you to consider this offer." Scarlett took the envelope with trembling hands, opened it, and saw a check. She was not good at reading large numbers, but she knew enough to recognize what she was looking at. A massive amount, 7 figures, more than everything she had earned in 3 years of grinding work put together. "What is this?" she asked, even though she already knew. "Mr. Victor Blackwood is offering you this money to leave his son's life," the first man explained, his tone still calm. "You will have enough to pay off your debts, buy a new home in another city, send your daughter to a good school. You only need to disappear from New York and never contact Marcus Blackwood again." Scarlett stared at the check, at the numbers that could change her life and Grace's. She thought about the shabby apartment they lived in, about the nights she lay awake worrying about money, about the foggy future she could not predict for her child. With this money, everything would be different. Grace would have a better life, chances Scarlett had never been able to give her on her own. But then she thought of Marcus. She thought of the way he had stitched her daughter's teddy bear back together, the way he had draped his coat over Scarlett's shoulders in the rain, the way he had wiped tears from her cheek under a burning sunset. She thought of those steel-gray eyes that warmed little by little whenever he watched Grace laugh, of his low, steady voice when he spoke to the child. She could not buy and sell that. She could not put a price on what they had begun to build. Scarlett tore the check in half, then tore it again into 4 pieces, then 8, the small scraps fluttering down onto the pavement like white snow. "I am not for sale," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I do not have much, but I have dignity. And I only want my daughter to grow up loved, not grow up with a mother willing to sell everything for money." The 2 men looked at each other, and Scarlett saw something shift in their eyes. The calm vanished, replaced by something far colder, far more threatening. "She will not cooperate," the first man said to the second. "That was not an offer, ma'am." The second man stepped forward, his voice like ice. "That was an order. And Mr. Victor's people are not used to being refused." He reached out, clamped his hand around Scarlett's wrist, and yanked hard. Pain shot up her arm. She tried to wrench free, but he was too strong. "Let me go," she screamed, her voice echoing through the empty alley. "Let go." The first man moved in, perhaps to cover her mouth or drag her toward the black car parked nearby. Scarlett panicked. She screamed and kicked wildly, but she knew she did not have a chance. They were bigger than her, stronger than her, and there was no one here to help. Then a dark shape burst from the shadows. So fast Scarlett could not fully see it, only a blur like a wild animal crashing straight into the space between the 2 men. There was the sound of fists landing, a cry of pain, and the hand gripping her wrist suddenly released. She stumbled and fell back, her spine hitting the brick wall, her eyes wide as she stared at what was happening in front of her, unable to believe it. Marcus stood there, between the 2 men, now on the ground, groaning. His gray eyes were winter ice. His face was a mask of pure anger. He looked down at them, and for the first time, Scarlett understood why the entire city feared this man. The first man tried to push himself up, but Marcus was already in front of him. One punch, fast and precise, like a steel-piercing bullet. It caught the man's jaw. There was a dry, cracking sound, and he hit the ground, unconscious before his back even met the pavement. The second man reacted faster. He pulled a switchblade from inside his jacket, the steel flashing under the streetlight. He lunged for Marcus, aiming for his stomach. But Marcus was faster. He shifted aside in a fraction of a second, the blade missing him by nothing. His left hand snapped shut around the man's wrist and twisted hard. A crack rang out, louder this time, and the man screamed as his wrist folded at an angle no wrist was meant to take. The knife clattered to the ground. Marcus did not let go. He kicked the back of the man's knee, forcing him down, then bent close and whispered into his ear, his voice so cold the air around them seemed to freeze. "Go tell Victor," he said slowly, each word clear. "The next time he sends anyone here, I'll send the bodies back." He released him, and the man collapsed face down, clutching his broken wrist and groaning. He crawled toward his partner, shaking him, and when the first man came to, both of them scrambled toward the black car. They disappeared into the darkness, the engine roaring and fading away, leaving Marcus and Scarlett alone in the silent alley. Marcus turned back to Scarlett. She was still sitting against the wall, trembling all over, eyes wide with shock. He walked to her, dropped to a kneel at her level, and for the first time Scarlett saw those steel-gray eyes soften. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice far gentler than it had been seconds earlier. Scarlett shook her head, but the tears were already spilling over. She cried, not from physical pain, but from everything that had just happened, from the fear she had carried for 3 years alone, finally breaking open, impossible to hold back. She cried because she had thought she would die tonight, because she had thought Grace would lose the last person she had left, because she did not know what to do anymore. Marcus took off his coat, the warm black wool still carrying a faint trace of cologne, and gently draped it over her shoulders. He did not offer empty comfort. He did not promise everything would be fine. He only sat beside her in silence and waited until her breathing slowed and her hands stopped shaking. "Why?" Scarlett finally asked, her voice broken between sobs. "Why did he do that? What do I have that he wants to take away?" Marcus looked at her, his eyes dark. "My father has never accepted anyone taking what he believes belongs to him," he said, his voice low and bitter. "To him, you are the thing distracting me, a weakness he can use. He thinks if he removes you, everything will go back to the way it was." Scarlett shook her head, tears still falling. "I'm not an object," she said, her words coming in pieces. "I'm not something people get to decide over. Buy, sell, throw away." Marcus held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly, and there was a pain in his eyes Scarlett had never seen before. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "But to him, I'm a thing too. Something to inherit, something to control, something built to serve his empire. He has never seen me as his son, only as a tool." Silence settled over them, heavy and aching. 2 wounded people, treated cruelly by the world, now sitting side by side in a cold, dark alley, sharing injuries they had hidden for too long. Scarlett lifted her hand and touched Marcus's hand where it rested on his knee. She did not speak. She only squeezed gently, to let him know she was here, that she understood, and that she was not going anywhere. The next morning, Marcus drove to the Long Island estate at first light, the earliest sunbeams cutting through a thin veil of mist over the green lawns surrounding the vast property. He did not announce himself. He did not call. He went straight to the main gate and waited for the guard to open it. They did not dare stop him. No one stood in the way when Marcus Blackwood walked forward with storm eyes. He passed through the heavy oak doors of the mansion, moved down the long hallway lined with expensive oil paintings and ancient steel armor, and went straight to Victor's study. He did not knock. He shoved the door open and stepped inside. Victor sat behind his desk with a cup of coffee still steaming in front of him, those sharp gray eyes lifted as his son appeared. He did not look surprised, as if he had known Marcus would come. He only leaned back in his chair, hands laced together across his chest, waiting. "I knew you would come," Victor said calmly. "Those 2 useless men reported what happened last night. They are lucky they came back alive." Marcus did not sit. He stood across from his father, the large wooden desk between them, though the real distance was a lifetime built from wounds and silence. He looked straight into Victor's eyes, and for the first time in his life he did not try to hide anything. "I have hated you my whole life," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, not shaking, not wavering, only bare truth. "I hate you because you never hugged me. Not once. Even when I was 5 and I fell and my knee was bleeding. I hate you because you never told me you loved me. Not once, even though I waited. Even though I did everything to make you proud. Even though I tried to become the man you wanted me to be." Victor did not answer. He only sat there, his face still stone cold, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker Marcus could not tell was real or imagined. "I hate you because you did not come to Mom when she was dying," Marcus went on, and the last word trembled at the edge of his voice, but he held it down. "She lay there waiting for you, speaking your name until her final breath. And where were you? In meetings, counting money, strengthening the empire you valued more than your wife and son." A heavy silence covered the room. Morning light poured through the window and spilled across the desk, but it could not drive away the darkness that surrounded them both. Marcus drew a deep breath, and when he spoke again, the anger was gone. In its place was a grief so deep it had been gathering for years. "But do you know what I hate most? I hate myself, because even after all of that, I still wanted you to accept me, still wanted you to look at me and say I did well, that I was a son you could be proud of. I am 37 years old. I am the man this city fears, but inside me, I am still that 10-year-old boy waiting for his father to hold him after his birthday party." Victor still said nothing. For the first time, Marcus saw his father truly silent, Not the calculating silence Victor usually used, but the silence of a man who did not know what to say. Maybe Victor was surprised. Maybe he had never heard his son speak this plainly. But today, Marcus continued, his voice steady again, I do not need that anymore. I do not need your acceptance. I do not need your pride. I do not need anything from you. Victor opened his mouth, as if he might say something, but Marcus did not give him the chance. I found what I need somewhere else, Marcus said. A woman who looks at me like I am human, not a tool. A child who asked me if I could be her father. Not because of power or money, but because she wants my love. They give me what you never did, and I will not let you, or anyone, take it from me. Marcus straightened, looked at his father one last time. I choose them, he said, each word as clear as an oath. Not this empire, not Blackwood blood, not you. I choose Scarlet and Grace. And if you touch them one more time, I will forget you are my father. Then he turned and walked toward the door. He did not look back. He did not wait for Victor's reaction. He did not care what Victor might say or do. His footsteps echoed down the long hallway, and when he stepped out into the morning sun, he felt lighter than he had ever felt, as if he had finally set down a weight he had carried on his shoulders for 37 years. That night, Marcus did not go back to the penthouse. He went to Scarlett's small apartment and knocked when the clock had already slipped past midnight. She opened the door, not surprised to see him, as if she had known he would come, as if she had been waiting too. Grace was asleep in the back room, the teddy bear held tight in her arms. The two adults sat down on the old sofa in the dark living room. They did not turn on a light. Only the faint glow from the street lamp outside spilled in through the window. They sat in silence for a long time, shoulder to shoulder, each one's warmth seeping into the other in the quiet. Then Marcus began to speak, his voice low and soft as a whisper, telling her things he had never told anyone. My mother was the gentlest woman I ever knew, he said, his eyes fixed on the darkness ahead as if he were looking straight into the past. She loved me without condition, in a way my father never could. When I fell, she held me. When I cried, she wiped my tears. When I was afraid, she told me everything would be all right, and I believed her, because she never lied to me. Scarlett listened without interrupting. She only placed her hand lightly on his arm, a quiet way of telling him she was here. But she got sick, Marcus went on, his voice roughening. Cancer. It ate at her slowly, painfully, and all I could do was sit there and watch the person I loved most wither a little more each day. My father never came to see her. He said he was busy with work, but I knew the truth. He was afraid to look at death, afraid to face weakness, afraid of his own feelings. He ran from it into his work, and my mother waited for him until her final breath. There was a stretch of silence, and then Marcus spoke again, almost too softly to hear. Before she died, she held my hand and said, "Don't become your father, Marcus. Love someone. Really love. Don't be afraid of love the way your father has been afraid." Scarlett felt tears rise, not only because of his story, but because she understood. She understood the pain of losing someone you love, the loneliness of long nights with no one beside you, the aching hunger to be loved, and being too afraid to hope. David told me something like that too, she said, her voice breaking. A week before he died, he held my hand and said, "If anything happens to me, let someone love you in my place. Don't live alone. Don't close your heart because of me. Let Grace have another father if she needs one. He only wanted us to be happy." She wiped her tears, but they kept falling. "I didn't believe it could ever happen," she whispered. "For 3 years, I only focused on surviving, on raising Grace, on making sure she didn't go without. I didn't think I could love anyone again. I didn't think I deserved to be loved." Marcus turned toward her. Even in the dimness, he could see the tears shining on her cheeks like small stars. He lifted his hand and brushed them away, the way he had in the park that day. "You deserve it," he said, low and certain. "You deserve to be loved, to be protected, to be happy. And I want to be the one who gives you that, if you'll allow me." Scarlett looked at him, looked into those gray eyes she had once feared, and now saw only honesty and gentleness. She did not speak. She only raised her hand to his face, felt the warmth of his skin under her palm, felt the way his heart was beating faster than usual. Then she leaned forward, and he leaned in too. Their first kiss was as soft as breath, trembling as a butterfly's wing, and yet it carried everything they could not put into words. Not a kiss of wild passion, but the kiss of two souls that had been broken, now finding their way back toward healing in each other's arms. When they pulled apart, forehead to forehead, their breathing mingled. Outside the window, the night sky was already turning a pale gray. Dawn was coming, and with it, a new beginning for them both. 1 week after that dawn night, Marcus called a leadership meeting in the underground office in Brooklyn, where the most important decisions of the Blackwood Empire were made. The room was spacious, washed in soft golden light. 12 men sat around a large oak table. Roman stood silent in the corner, as always. They were all men who had followed Marcus for years. They had watched him build and expand the empire Victor left behind. They had been loyal through bloody wars and sleepless nights. Now they looked at him with expectation, not knowing what news could be important enough for him to summon them all like this. Marcus stood at the head of the table and looked at each man, taking in the faces that had been beside him for 15 years. Then he spoke, calm but clear. "I'm stepping down," he said. "Effective today, Roman Vance will take over and run all operations." Silence fell over the room. No one could believe what they had heard. Marcus Blackwood, the man who had made this empire the most feared power in Brooklyn, the man who had fought and sacrificed for this position, now he was saying he was leaving. Roman stepped forward, his face still unreadable, but his eyes full of shock. "Boss," he said quietly, "are you sure?" Marcus looked at his loyal bodyguard, the man who had stood beside him since the earliest days, the only person he trusted completely in this dark world. "I built this for 15 years, Marcus said, and there was a tiredness in his voice he no longer wanted to hide. "I lost my mother. I lost my youth. I lost my ability to love. I lost everything worth living for to build this. And now I want to take back what I lost, before it's too late." He turned to the others at the table. "Roman is the best man to lead you," he said. "Be loyal to him the way you were loyal to me. That is my last order." No one protested. They only nodded, accepting in silence, because they knew that when Marcus Blackwood decided something, no one could change it. Marcus shook Roman's hand, a firm grip loaded with meaning, then walked out of the room. He moved down the dark corridor, climbed the stairs, pushed open the heavy steel door, and stepped out into the sunlight. The late afternoon sun was bright and warm against his skin, and he realized it had been a long time since he had felt something so simple and so beautiful. He drove to Scarlett's apartment, not the cold penthouse on the highest floor of Manhattan, but the small third-floor place with its sagging stairs and dim hallway. When he knocked, Grace opened the door. Her face lit up the moment she saw him. "Mr. Marcus," she squealed, "did you come to have dinner with us?" The smell of food drifted out from the kitchen, fried onions and slow-cooked meat, the simple, comforting sense of an ordinary family. Scarlett appeared from the kitchen, an apron tied around her waist, a wooden spoon still in her hand, smiling when she saw him. "You came just in time for dinner," she said, her voice gentle and warm. They ate together at the small table that barely fit 3 people. The food was simple, but good. Grace's laughter never stopped as she talked about school and her friends. Marcus sat there in the cramped apartment with its worn furniture. No luxury penthouse, no powerful empire, no fearsome authority that made the whole city tremble. Only a woman looking at him with love, a child calling his name with joy, and an ordinary dinner, like millions of other dinners in this world, and that was all he needed. 6 months later, spring arrived with cherry blossoms blooming along the quiet streets of suburban New Jersey, where Marcus and Scarlett had rented a small house with a wide yard for Grace to run and play. The wedding was held right there in the backyard. Simple, warm, just like their love. There were no hundreds of guests, no lavish reception in a 5-star hotel, no press, no headlines, only about 20 people. Kind neighbors, a few of Scarlett's former co-workers, Roman standing quietly in a corner, the silent protector he had always been. White folding chairs were set in 2 neat rows on the green grass. Tiny string lights hung between the tree branches. Wildflowers sat in glass jars lining the aisle. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering bright golden streaks across the garden, and a soft breeze carried the scent of spring. Scarlett stood at the end of the aisle, so beautiful it stole the breath away, in a simple white lace dress. Her auburn hair fell loose over her shoulders, tucked with one small white wildflower. No expensive jewelry, no elaborate makeup, only a radiant smile and eyes shining with happiness. Beside her was Grace, the smallest and sweetest flower girl, wearing a pale pink dress that flared at the skirt. She hugged the teddy bear with its mended ear and walked forward, shy but proud. Marcus waited at the front, dressed in a navy suit without a tie. Plain, but still carrying the natural elegance he could never fully let go of, even after leaving the underworld behind. When he saw Scarlett walking toward him, Grace's hand in hers, his heart beat so hard it felt like it might break. This was a moment he had never thought he would have, a moment he had never dared to dream of. And now, it was real. They stood facing each other beneath a simple floral arch, Grace between them, looking up at both of them with those bright blue eyes. The officiant spoke the familiar words, but Marcus did not hear them. He only looked into Scarlett's eyes, drowning in the warmth there. Then it was time for vows, and he knew he had to say something worthy of the woman in front of him. "I'm not good with loving words," he began, his voice low but steady. "I grew up in a family where love wasn't spoken, wasn't shown, wasn't admitted. I thought I would be that way forever, cold and alone, not knowing how to love, not deserving to be loved." He looked at Grace, then back at Scarlett, his eyes bright. "But then a 4-year-old girl asked me to fix her teddy bear, and her mother showed me that love doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be real. And I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to love, every day, little by little. I will live with love, every day. That is my vow." Scarlett cried, happy tears spilling down her cheeks, and when she spoke her own vows, her voice shook with emotion. But it was true. They exchanged rings. They kissed. Grace squealed and clapped, her small applause rippling through the garden as everyone cheered for them. The reception was simple, with a homemade cake and music playing from a small Bluetooth speaker. People laughed and talked and danced on the grass, and for the first time Marcus understood what it meant to belong somewhere, to belong to a family. He was watching Grace chase soap bubbles a neighbor was blowing for her when his eyes drifted to the last row of chairs, where few people were paying attention, and he froze. Victor Blackwood was sitting there, alone, on a white folding chair set apart from the crowd. He wore a light gray shirt, no suit, no cane. He looked older and more tired than the last time Marcus had seen him. No one had invited him. Only Roman had noticed him, giving a subtle nod to the security team to stand down and grant the old man his final, silent peace. But he was there, silent, watching his son's wedding from a distance. Father and son met eyes for a single heartbeat. Victor did not stand. He did not come closer. He did not speak. He only nodded once, slow and heavy with meaning, then rose and walked away. Before he left, he stopped by the gift table, set down a small wooden box, and disappeared into the fading light without a word. Marcus stood still, watching his father's back vanish beyond the fence, his chest full of feelings he could not name. He walked to the table and lifted the box. It was familiar in a way that hurt, the same kind of box his father had given him when he was 10. He opened the lid, and his heart missed a beat. Inside was the wooden model airplane, painted navy blue. The color faded a little with time, but still whole, still beautiful. The same airplane he had thought was lost forever. At the bottom of the box lay a small piece of paper, the handwriting unsteady with age, yet still clear. "Father did not know how to love you the right way, but Father always loved. This is the airplane Father carved for you when you were 10. You left it behind when you went away, and Father has kept it ever since. Father hopes you are happy, my son." Marcus stood frozen, the airplane in one hand, the small note in the other, and for the first time since his mother died, he cried. Not loud, not breaking into sobs, only quiet tears sliding down his face, falling onto the small piece of paper, carrying the love his father had never known how to speak out loud. 1 year after the wedding, Marcus's life had changed completely in a way he never could have imagined. On Sunday morning, the small suburban house was filled with warm sunlight and the sweet smell of flour, melting butter, and maple syrup. Marcus stood in the kitchen with an apron tied around his waist, a spatula in hand as he flipped golden pancakes in the pan. Grace sat on the countertop right beside him, legs swinging, her mouth never stopping as she talked about last night's dream, about the neighbor's cat she got to play with, about her best friend in preschool that she wanted to invite over this coming weekend. "You know what, Daddy?" she said, pressing the word Daddy with the proud emphasis she always used when she called him that. "Yesterday I introduced Daddy to my friend Lily. I told her my daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world. Lily said she wants to taste them too." Marcus smiled, slid the last pancake onto a plate, then turned to look at his daughter. "Then invite her to Sunday breakfast next week," he said. Grace squealed with delight, hopped down from the counter, and ran off to find her mother so she could announce the good news. Scarlett stood by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands, looking out at the small garden where the flowers they had planted together were blooming. She turned as Grace rushed in to hug her legs, bent down to kiss her daughter's curly hair, then lifted her eyes to Marcus with a look full of love. It was the simplest moment, but to Marcus, it was worth more than any empire he had ever built. 6 months earlier, Victor Blackwood had died in his sleep, peaceful and quiet, the way he had lived in the final months after learning he had late-stage cancer. Marcus did not attend the funeral, but he received a letter from his father's lawyer, along with a will leaving everything to him, even though Marcus did not need it and did not want it. The letter was what mattered most. It was handwritten, the script trembling with the hand of a man who knew he had little time left. Marcus, the letter began. I know I failed, not at building an empire, but at being a father. I was so afraid of weakness that I pushed everyone away. You, your mother. I did not know how to love. I did not know how to hold you when you cried. I did not know how to say I was proud of you. But I want you to know this. You do not need to become me. You only need to be yourself. And looking at you now, with that wife and that little girl, I know you have done what I never could. You learned how to love. That is the greatest success of your life. And it is the only thing I truly wanted you to have. Marcus read that letter many times. He cried alone late at night when Scarlett and Grace were asleep. And at last, he forgave his father in a way he never thought he would be able to. Sunset came, and the sky softened into shades of orange, pink, and violet. The three of them sat on the porch swing in the backyard. Grace in the middle, her head leaning against Marcus's shoulder, her legs draped across Scarlett's lap. The teddy bear with its mended ear rested safely in her arms, still the dearest friend she never went without. This was Marcus's favorite time of day, when everything slowed down, when nothing mattered except the even breathing of his daughter and the warmth of his wife beside him. I love you, Mommy, Grace suddenly murmured, already sleepy. I love you, Daddy. Scarlett squeezed her daughter's hand, tears glittering in her eyes even as she smiled. Marcus bent down, kissed the top of Grace's head, and whispered what he had never been able to say to his own father, but now could say every day to this small family. Daddy loves you too. Forever. Grace fell asleep in their arms, and Marcus sat there, watching the sunset fade, watching the first stars appear in the sky, feeling the peace he had searched for his entire life. He had once been the man the whole city feared. He had once held power and money that others barely dared to dream of. But now, sitting on an old porch swing with his wife and daughter, he was richer than he had ever been. Happiness does not have to be perfect. It only has to be real. And like the teddy bear with its mended ear, broken things can still be repaired. They can still be filled with love, as long as we do not give up on them. This story brings us a deep lesson about the power of love, about forgiveness, and about how it is never too late to change. No matter who you are, no matter what you have done, no matter how dark your past has been, you still deserve to be loved. And you can still learn how to love others. Sometimes all we need is one person who looks into our eyes with hope instead of fear, and one chance to become a better version of ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video so more people can hear meaningful stories each day. We would truly love to know how you feel about this story. Did it bring up something in your real life? Is there someone in your life who needs forgiveness or needs love? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what is deep in your heart. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. We wish you and your family good health, a joyful life, peace, and love every day. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.